Great. I'm with my old Jewish friend, David or David. What do you prefer to go by, David or David?
I like Duvid, but David's fine. Say Duvid is just
Yeah.
the Yiddish uh, pronunciation of David.
Oh, so the Davids are more accurate, actually. So I love calling people by their proper names. So David, thank you so much for being here. It's been a while. David, I like to keep intros super short. So David is a Jewish, so follows Judaism, but also Hinduism. So we're going to get two different interesting perspectives. Of course, there's going to be the David's all sorts of personal perspective in different ways. I'm a Muslim, particularly an Ahmadi Muslim. We're a very friendly, love for all, hatred for none is our motto internationally. So that's where I come from. But what have we got to say about this topic? This incredibly important topic where men are really suffering from in the West, the lack of knowing what it is to be a man today. So let's play this video, and as our part, this is our kind of standard format. Respond to a let's say some sort of expert. This is a well-known psychologist on the topic of the role of boys and men in modern society. Let's go.
When fathers aren't around, you'll often see little boys who are more impulsive, who are more aggressive. Fathers and mothers are both critical to the development of children, which is a very controversial thing to say today, because if you're raised without one, you are missing a piece. But they're not the same. And they're not the same because our hormones dictate they're not the same. So fathers produce a hormone in great quantities called vasopressin. Vasopressin is the protective aggressive hormone. It helps fathers to protect their family. There was a study that was done where mothers and fathers lay in bed, the baby cries, and the fathers sleep through the baby's distress cries, but the mothers wake up right away. But with the rustling of leaves outside the window, the mothers sleep through it and the fathers wake up right away because the fathers are attuned to predatorial threat. So our nurturing hormones make us different when fathers aren't around.
Okay, so I like to give my 30-second response to where I'm going to be going in this video, and to this respond to this video as well. I would say, as a Muslim, we try to stay close to nature, and it we've kind of ignored nature, especially in Western materialistic society. We've kind of gone away from our feelings of what it is truly to be a man. When we go away from nature, we suffer a lot. So if you look at the long form of this video, you say the science is telling us we have to go back to what it truly is to be a man. And you might say, what does that mean? Because we've got, I think, quite confused about some basic things. And we can talk about what that is. But when we go away from who we truly are, and that's as human beings, and the subcategories, a man or a woman, whatever you are, we harm society, we harm ourselves. But there's evidence to show that we have more mental illnesses, we have a breakdown in society, we economically fail, and spiritually, that is ultimately, as a human being, whether you're a man or a woman, you fail. Spiritually, that means being true with your true spirit, feeling true happiness, long-term happiness. We fail in all those aspects if we go away from what it is to be a man. So that's my answer, and an Islamic answer. And I give lots of references to what I'm saying from the Quran, etc. In the description, I have a document which also has a link to this video and the long form of this video. So that's my quick answer. David, what have you got to say? What are your thoughts on this? Oh, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
Oh yeah, great. Sorry, I was muted.
Oh,
I was just trying to
yeah.
uh, share the space on Facebook. I got on Twitter and my
Awesome.
Discord.
Yes, thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, being Duvid, and I have my multiple truth hypothesis and a somewhat Talmudic way of analyzing these situations. Um, certainly for myself, or you're speaking as a Jew, someone who tries my best to follow Jewish practices, been studying it my whole life. there's not necessarily a definitive answer because you have to explain the vast majority of Jews, like say in America, are on the left and have contrary positions on many of these issues, but they also are drawing inspiration or being informed by the Jewish religion, Jewish history, and Jewish law, even if their approach appears to be the exact opposite of a traditional understanding. So, you have your various Jewish populations uh, with different political understandings, daily life understanding, liberalization from the extremist Haredi that don't want to accept any change to atheistic
But what
secular.
say, because I know there's a lot of left-leaning Jews who kind of gone away from the religion. So I'm more interested in what does Judaism have to offer to men? What does Hinduism have to offer? Because you're also, I'd say, practicing Hindu, and your personal point of view. Like the short version to get people to know what you think or what are the solutions. And then we'll deep dive afterwards.
Okay, yeah, because I try to be intellectually or politically correct, careful to talk about very say plus just accurate to jump right in saying that doesn't match my perception or um, understanding. So
Yeah.
because the Bible and the myths in general don't speak in a modern type format where it just says like these are the rules, these are the guiding principles, like a modern day law book. So Jews largely live Orthodox Jews, people, the halakha, which is the best understanding of how to live according to Jewish law, as interpreted by the sages of the generation, because Judaism has these liberalizing mechanism to adapt the law within certain boundaries, and it's supposed to be adapted by councils of sages, local rabbis, rabbinic courts, regional, and the grand court that would but in these cases that Judaism does liberalize and does accommodate and assimilate best practices from the diaspora nations they're living beneath among, and that could explain the wide variety. So, uh, all aspects of Jewish law, it's been liberated to some extent. Like no one, 'cause, almost all rabbinic groups agree with this process.
Well, so there's different interpretations, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I assume you want to refer to the more orthodox who would
But okay,
accept
what
what
do
they
you feel
spoke
like
as
if
authoritative,
you
because you're going
thought
to have
what is
you
the
want someone
best
to accept
answer
an
according to
authoritative
you?
what you want someone who accepts an authoritative rabbi or text to say this is the proper way to to conduct yourself, and that it has some form of authoritative rules based order that an adherent lives according, because the majority of Jews don't really follow it like that. They don't have an authoritative rabbi or text that basically says these are the obligations of man, and are
Okay.
going to take a more liberating. They might still have
So
counsel.
are you saying Judaism doesn't have clear-cut solutions for men,
What I mean from
or
the
what their role is and how to live well as men, how to find their place as men?
what you have are guiding principles and founding mythology as found in the Bible, which is universally recognized or at least
Okay, cool. Give me
inspiration
one because
to
I want
all
to.
Jews.
I want the viewers to know what they can possibly gain from Judaism or Hinduism. Give me one thing from Judaism that you think guides you personally as a man, and one thing from you gain from Hinduism that guides you personally as a man. Just want to get into the meat of things
Okay,
quickly.
okay, yeah. I just want to sorry to finish the point from an Orthodox perspective. You have authoritative books that basically tell you every single small aspect of your life how you should handle it. Um, but in terms of these guiding principles, you say, okay, like we learn from our patriarchs, and a lot of those are common with Islam of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Moses, Solomon, and all of them have lessons of what it means to be a man. All of them specifically great care into educating their children, into keeping the tradition of making sure they serve God properly, as well as
Okay.
being active in their.
So all of these prophets, as far as I'm aware, they were husbands, they were fathers, they tried to be that as much as possible. I've got Claire, our friend Claire, you know Claire, the secular Quranist.
Okay, yeah, God bless Claire. She's the one who I think referred us when we first talked.
Yes, that's right. Good memory. So thanks, Claire, for putting us together all that time ago. So she's saying you're not a husband or father. And in Islam, that's a very important role for men to have. Like all men are supposed to try to get married. And I would say in Islam, that is one of the pivotal roles of a man to find his place, to basically by being a family man, being a father, by being a husband, you're leading a family, which is the smallest element, I would say, of a society. In society grows from that. Without that, you have the breakdown of society. Some people might find that hard to swallow, that being a husband is a pivotal role, but I think it is, and I can talk about that. But is it correct that you're not a husband or a father to start off with? And is that
That is true.
Is there a
And
reason for that? And does that clash with Judaism? Because in Judaism, I get this general sense that they love to be married and have loads and loads of children. At least what are they called? The serious Jews, what they call it? Not the
Orthodox
Lebanese.
Brady, or referring to the people who have the authoritative books that detail how you should
Yeah.
prescribe.
So let's start with that. Let's start from your position. You said you're not a husband or a father. How is that possibly in line with Judaism, or is that a conflict?
Well, Judaism recognizes failures and to somewhat the commonplace of failures and how to deal with failures, personal failures, communal failures, and all these things, which is going to be important to the role of men. Because women will have some aspect, but men in another. But say, okay, like unquestionably, being a father, getting married, raising your children is one of the prime directives of Judaism. It's the first commandment in the Bible: be fruitful and multiply. There's countless, but for whatever reason, my own personal failures. I'm not rejecting the commandment, but sometimes you don't succeed or life doesn't go the way you plan. I still hope to get married and have a family, but there is some aspect of like a judge or certain like respectful communal leaders, often a requirement for certain communal leadership roles is having stable family structure. Being you want your parents, grandparents, people with large families that have a large stake in the community. So like if I was running to be on the board of directors of some organization or to be a community rabbi, that would be a reasonable um objection. Like he doesn't have
Okay,
family.
so are you saying that, okay, in short, you're saying you want to be married, you want to have kids, but the Jewish community has failed you, and you would
I
say,
said my personal failures. I didn't blame anybody other
okay.
than myself.
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
mean, there's certain things that whatever that to explain circumstances or why things didn't go the way you might have planned, without getting into just saying for the purpose of the conversation, say my own personal failures.
okay. That's very honest of you to take responsibility. Um, So I will just, because I want to touch in, like I've asked you a question, like one thing that Judaism brings to saving men in modern society and Hinduism, I should answer that question more directly. And one is that psychologists, a famous psychologist called Viktor Frankl, who's also a Jew, but he wasn't really a practicing Jew, as far as I understand. He was just a very well respected psychologist on happiness, says that happiness comes from responsibility. So you need to find serious, meaningful responsibility. And in Islam, raising a family, being responsible, being kind to your wife, supporting your wife, these are responsibilities that are meaningful because you want to raise children to make a better society. It's not just simply to have sex. It's not just a simple romantic involvement. In fact, everything a Muslim does has to be guided towards God, being closer to God by being selfless toward your wife, for example. That is a very important role for a husband in actually imitating God in ways. Like God is generous, who gives without expecting anything back. That's how you're supposed to be as a husband, for example. So these are all spiritual things or spiritual actions. So yeah, and when you do that, you find happiness. So that's that's like a little bit of an answer as to what it means, why, how to be a good, uh, um, how to find your place in society, be a husband, and why that's important. Essentially, responsibility makes you happy. In fact, Viktor Frankl said it's a shame that there's only a Statue of Liberty. There should be a Statue of Responsibility as well, because that guides people more, I guess. So what are your thoughts about that? Do you think being a husband makes you a better man?
Well, and maybe being a good husband makes you a better man. I mean, I don't know if being
Yeah.
a bad husband is going to help you, and say maybe just the act of fulfilling the commandment or being within a marriage has a net positive benefit. And as we get more into detail, like I would probably agree the most central role and obligation of a man is to find a wife and build up his own family. And many of the responsibilities of a man are related to that or have to take into account that. However, um, as someone who doesn't have a wife and didn't build up a family yet, there's still a lot of obligations that a man. I mean, sort of like between Judaism and Islam, there's an obligation to charity. There's obligations to the community. There's obligations in business and taxes and all sorts of things that apply equally to all men, regardless of father or parental status. And certain things that like male obligations of military service or patrolling the community or maybe hard labor. Um, Sometimes there's a small differentiation between married men and non-married men, but often no. I mean, it's not the case. If something like that calls upon the obligation of men, like being a father or a husband, is not going to exempt you. So in that aspect, there might consider being higher orders of duty for a man, and you might consider like you're doing that for your children or for your family, but is that actually the proper perspective? Because men who don't have a family are being called up for the same responsibility of being a man in these certain cases, in terms like governance or uh, being an important leader in your.
But if I'm trying to my viewers, my target audience, I should say, are essentially people who don't have a faith, but I think would benefit from a faith and guidance. And I'm talking about the average Westerner. The average Westerner, kind of, especially in the UK, lost religion. They're not really into Christianity anymore. And I want to give them nuggets of wisdom as potentially that could help them. What could be? I'm not sure if I could define a nugget of wisdom yet that you've given. And I'm not. Maybe I haven't either. Maybe you can pull me up on that as well. So you agree that religiously you should be married, right? But why? What could the average man benefit from by being married? You're mute. What? I lost your sound. What's happened? Or is it mine?
I apologize. I muted
Around,
myself.
you'll often see little boys who are more impulsive, who are more aggressive. Fathers and
Sorry, go on. You what were you saying? Yep.
What the Judeo perspective, you have it as commandment, that God commanded it, whether it makes sense or not. But to some extent seen as logical with deeper theological, you have to come into the whole purpose of life and death and the circle of life and death for a theological perspective on why you should have children or raise your kids. But the Judaism story, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's put into the Bible with this promise to Abraham and the special way that God needs to teach the Jewish people. And there's an obligation because God demands this way of life. It has some sort of special purpose in the redemption of humanity, the unfolding of history. It necessitates Jewish continuity. It necessitates Jews marrying Jews, having Jewish children, and training their kids in this lifestyle, teaching them these teachings, and then a constant effort to make sure that your kids follow through and grow up as adults that continue the cycle.
Okay, so the benefit of, from a Jewish perspective, the benefit of being a dad or a father and being a good father and a good Jewish father is just to simply continue Judaism. And maybe that's not just because Judaism has many benefits, like it's communal, has many good teachings, healthy teachings. It keeps society going. So is that what you're basically saying? Is just to keep Judaism going because Judaism is good?
Well, unfortunately, for you kind of have to take a heretical stance, to say, well, it's good because God commanded it, and presumably God commanded it has these utilitarian benefits.
Yeah.
But just because it has utilitarian benefits, if you're trying to sell it on its utilitarian benefits, that's almost as heretical to selling it for the.
Well, let's be heretical because that's fine because it's useful for the conversation, right? It's useful for the target audience. We're trying to give, like, even if you're basically, the idea is my target audience are probably not Jewish. To be a Jew is a very small group, right? And most of my target audience, or the target audience I have in mind at least, are people who don't have a religion, but I think would really benefit from clear guidance, which religion gives. So that's fine. Whatever you say. I think this is a great question on the screen. What is a man and what should he be capable of doing? I want to give a really short answer. A man, as opposed to a woman, is, according to Islam, has to do three things. He's to provide, protect, and guide. Okay, and those are scientifically, you can prove that those are the things that he's particularly good at, and that doesn't mean that women are inferior. They just have different functions. And what this great video, not just this YouTube short of this lady, but as soon as we fall into line with those particular things, if you look at the longer version of this video, she goes into how the traditional roles that have been taught by all the Abrahamic faiths, at least. I'm not too sure what Hinduism teaches on this. You could possibly tell me. When you fit in with those traditional roles, men do well, women also do well, children do well, and I guess society does well because she focused mainly on individuals. So what is a man? He does those three things: provide, protect, and guide. And just to why should a man guide? I'll give a quick answer. I think the protect is pretty obvious. We're bigger, generally speaking. Provide, very quickly, people don't like that there's a gender pay gap, but actually that's just evidence that men are just better at making money. Okay, and that's a whole discussion by itself. But why should they guide? Testosterone, higher levels of testosterone increases spatial awareness, which is another technical way of saying logic. So we're more logical. It doesn't mean women are worse. It's just that it's lovely having the feminine side of things, which are more emotional and caring and things like that, right? So we're more logical, we're more interested in the world as well, and we've built the world as it is. We built all of what the buildings essentially and the technology that keeps the world, and we still do that. That's not outdated. Where men are more focused on what we call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These are the things that make they're the mechanics of society. The apps of today and things like that, all based on all this kind of stuff. So that's what Islam says, and it's scientifically in line with nature, the Islamic role of a man. And of course, when men have their role, women get to play their role as well, because they're part of the puzzle. We're not fighting each other, we're part of a puzzle to work together. So what would be your answer to that's my answer to Claire's question. What's your answer to Claire's question on the screen?
Well, a man is from like a strict biblical Judaic perspective, a man has the highest obligation, probably also Hindu and Islamic, that man is the essential purpose of creation. God, everything else going on the planet, God has specific interest in humans and specific interest in a type of worship that only man is capable of carrying out.
Really,
And
man, not woman.
well, yeah, I'm saying
Just to
like
be clear.
well, I mean specifically, even for modern Judaism, the majority of the rituals in the temple service, it's all men. So when I was in Orthodox society, uh, synagogues were basically all men. Occasionally, had a women's section or a balcony, but the ritual, everything, control of larger politics, everything was just always gender segregated. People
Does
went home.
that, are you trying to, because men in Islam, we have a similar thing, but it doesn't have the same implications that you seem to be having. Like you seem to be saying women are inferior in Judaism. Is that right?
No, I didn't use the word inferior, but
Okay.
if you're going to say that the pinnacle purpose of creation is the activity of man, not women, and it doesn't put in an inferior position, but whatever the reason that, I mean, God obviously cares about all creation, all humanity, but there's a central function why God revealed himself to humankind and gave the prophecies and in the law, and a lot of that applies to women, but it has this higher, more important aspect, and that's basically
Interesting.
completely the purview of man in terms of regular prayers, special prayers to be said, daily rituals, and your larger governing, financial, and like, okay, you could, if you're a woman in business, because usually it's going to become systematic. You could try to give a person some guiding principles of
What
what it
should
means.
he be capable of besides rituals? Because I think the average viewer or my intended viewer won't be too impressed by the fact that a man's role, even if he's superior in some way, right, or have superior roles in the synagogue at least, they won't be really impressed by that. They'd be like, so what? I don't want to just be fulfilling rituals.
Well, I mean, the
What can
difficult
you
sell.
offer the average person? What can Judaism offer? Like, try to sell a Jewish, sell Judaism in some way, sell Judaism to men, the average man. Like, what's so great? But I think Judaism has a lot to offer, actually. They seem to have beautiful communities, strong families. I think men would love that kind of stuff, that if they were given that level of importance. But you sell it rather than me.
Well, ironically, Judaism's not set up that way. You're supposed to discourage conversion, and that you say, like, yeah, Judaism's really
Oh,
difficult. You probably wouldn't find it that
I
interesting.
know that. Yeah. But
But I'm saying from trying to, it's a
you're not
misnomer.
trying to tell them to convert. Maybe they can steal something from Judaism
I mean, it's a
ideas.
misnomer to falsely advertise Judaism, to say, like, here's these nuggets and these guiding principles, because like Judaism certainly has those. However, to be like a proper uh, Torah Jew, you have to follow the law in all aspects, and the guiding principles might help you understand the law better, or when there's a conflict
Are
between
you
different areas
saying
of
that
law.
like I would say it would be like in Islam, it even just encourages people just to be good Jews or good
But I mean, that means law
Christians.
abiding, and it's an acceptance that there's a known code that basically answers near all questions. And if you have a question that's not in the known code, you could take it to your sages that will make a ruling, and then that will become a known code. So you don't just do whatever you want or look at guiding principles.
Sure.
There's a clearly authoritative law code that theoretically should be followed in all cases. So what does it mean to be a man? A man is someone who voluntarily follows, in Judaism, halacha. And so you're religiously, and that doesn't just mean guiding principles. That means all of it to the best of their ability. And that also
What
means
should you
every
be
single
capable of?
situation you should look up, so if you're approaching, so if you're not in business and you never really learn business law, and now all of a sudden you're doing business, you have to learn the business law, and that might apply to a woman. Women generally aren't taught business law, but if somehow a woman ends up in business, she would have the obligation uh, to know the business law and act uh, accordingly. And so, generally, all of these things, they're just designed for men. All the things like about politics.
So there's a business law in Judaism for men, like men should be involved in business or work, or is that what you're saying?
Well, there's biblical factors that could exclude a woman from business or make it more difficult.
And that's fine. I agree with that. I think a lot of women want to be excluded from it if they can, right? Because women are abused in the modern world of work, right? They get paid less, and people take advantage of their kindness and agreeableness. And I think a lot of women would love to be excluded from the work and from the world of work, and have their husbands, work for them and provide the money so they can focus on their children, which is another massive problem that Western society and Western families and Western children are really missing and suffering, because they're not getting the attention women, I think, would love to give to their children. So I don't think there's any problem about saying let's exclude women, because a lot of them want to be excluded. That's not a problem. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough
Go on.
to say something for the Western world where gender segregation is so unusual, or not to having a society that has gender segregation, or even to say which one's better, which one's more in line with God's law. And then you kind of have to weigh in like the God factor. So if it's just utilitarian, like that's why it's so difficult to sell traditional Islam or Judaism. Although you have some success in terms, like a lot of people will do something just for the utilitarian value.
Islam's the fastest growing religion in the world, so I think people are appreciating this sort of segregation, or difference, at least distinguishing between men and women. It's a real problem at the moment, so I don't think that's a problem. In fact, that's a strength. People, I think, I don't know if people. It's the fastest growing religion in the world, so there's no problem in that sense, I think.
Well, I mean, even here in like Metro Detroit, where it's one of the largest, like, no, I mean, those practices, like in terms of like gender segregation, are almost completely withheld to the Muslim dominated areas where there's thousands, tens of thousands of Muslims, and could recreate societies in accordance with American law that has gender segregation. But in saying most of the conversion is happening around those areas where people are acclimating into. You have some Muslim expansion, and if the Muslim community is big enough, they might open up a school. But like, no, I mean, the gender segregation is such outside of the American norm that I don't see it. I mean, even though more people are converting to Islam, the number of Muslims are growing. Those things are very difficult to change, and even without mean, you could have some aspect. Like I said, people will do things for success or a better life, even if they don't think it's true. In the sense, like people become Orthodox Christian, or because they want to reproduce, they want to meet a girl and build up a family, and even though they logically, according to reason, they reject the religion as being false. They say, well, they're going to play along with it in order to build up a family structure. And you could say that the sell of a religion in or traditional patriarchal a role that most religions spell out, uh, works to producing the family unit, building up families.
Let me ask you a question based on what Claire has said. What should men be capable of? She thinks like we should just be able to have sex and whatever. I think somewhere she said, right? But I think we should be able to do lots of things. But let me put a question to you. Should it be men who should primarily be the breadwinners, the people who provide for the family? I'm going to give my quick answer because, first of all, they're more capable, which I've said already, but very interesting thing that's hidden within the text of the Quran about why also men should work is because they enjoy it. We enjoy being productive outside the home. So those are two reasons. And so that therefore that makes men happier. So question to you, do you think men should be the primary providers for families?
I wouldn't phrase it in that way because I'm not a prescriptive type person who said like this is the way it should be or this is what you should do. But I mean, clearly in a biblical perspective, it's a man's obligation, and a man has failed his obligation. Like whether there could be a case where a woman works and she's
so you agree through biblical teachings, okay? And we talk about being prescriptive because I think it's good to be prescriptive, but not enforce. That's a different thing.
But I mean,
do you think there's any good reason, or do you think my argument for the fact that we're more capable and we actually enjoy working, men enjoy working outside the home, that is a good reason for men doing that particular role?
No, because I don't think it's so clear cut. There's a large variety of men that, to say that some blanket thing that they all enjoy the same thing. Like there's certainly going to be varieties of men that may enjoy work more or less than there may be varieties of women where some women enjoy work. So I'm not sure as a general rule, that's why you're saying should. You say, well, no, I'm not sure that there's a should. Like men have an obligation to support the family. Does that mean that women shouldn't work, or does that mean that it's a woman's choice whether she works or not? But whether she should or shouldn't is not really even a valid question. And in terms of the men, you say, well, men have an obligation to support the family. They don't necessarily have an obligation to work. And you're saying just so I would always try to put in the obligation category because the should apply to your a human utilitarian standard towards a person's subjective moral standard, or if it's because it's God's command, then should's probably not the right word either, because then you're saying it's some sort of mystical metaphysical reality that God has commanded.
Okay, let me put it this way. You said that you don't like to be prescriptive, and I think men are looking for guidance. And I want to say this is what you should do. Men are not looking for maybe, I don't know. They really want to know what to do with their lives. That's like, when you have, I don't know what they call it anymore, self-help guides or all this kind of stuff where people are offering advice in different books. People want really clear-cut advice about what to do with their lives. Like if you're giving advice on how to be a great orator or how to speak, you don't say maybe you should do this, whatever. It's like you should do this, and this is why.
Yeah, but
what's your problem with being clear?
Saying, the reason I'm not like that is because I am not an authority in the sense like, okay, the Bible's an authority, the prophets, maybe certain leaders of the generation that prescribe law, but beyond that, like you're saying, like no, absolutely not. Like um, sorry, my phone's ringing, but that's why I'd be careful with these words. But saying like,
Hmm.
okay, there needs to be, okay, it's nothing. There needs to be prescription, but to know that that's not my authority. Maybe you could try to prescribe things for your children, for your family, but beyond that, and then it's saying like, there we do need prescription, but prescription comes from God. And then if
Okay, let
you're
me ask you a maybe seemingly unrelated question, but probably not that obvious. Quite obvious, I think, the link. Do you care about um, the continuation of humanity? Like, because we've got a population implosion, and I could argue very strongly it's because of our lack of following our natural design or natural roles as men and women. So let's start with, do you think it's important for humanity to continue to exist?
theologically, I would probably answer no, although it's going to be
Oh, wow.
complicated. I mean,
Theologically, it doesn't matter if we continue to exist, even though the Bible says, be fruitful and multiply.
well, the Kabbalists understand, like with the Messiah, that the world will come to an end. There'll be a
But
messianic,
until then,
but I mean, in that to say that I'm not outsmarting God or God's plans for humanity. It could be a temporal thing that the world was created
okay,
and we're doing
theologically,
something. Then
even though I
after that,
disagree about your interpretation of the Bible, right, or the
yeah.
Torah,
But I'm saying
uh,
if God doesn't think it's important for humanity to continue, who am I to say that it's important for
yeah,
humanity to
but
continue?
up to a point, he told you to be fruitful and multiply. So that's why I disagree with your
He didn't say that
interpretation.
the reason to be fruitful and multiply was because the importance of humanity continuing. That's the important thing, is your obligation. And it's if sometimes there's a reason given, but
Okay, what about you as an individual? Do you think it's important for humanity to continue, or doesn't it? Or I mean, there are a lot of people, especially atheists, who just aren't bothered really. So, how do you feel about it? Should humanity continue for at least another 1,000 years or so?
I would say my opinion on the matter doesn't matter, and as someone who largely understands modern philosophy, like I would had a brief atheist period in high school. My dad's a doctor, and I've studied a lot of biology and evolution. Although generally I reject it. But if you're just asking, does life, if you put in a simplification term like does life have meaning, and say like, well, unfortunately, I believe in these things, but I can't definitively, logically, decisively answer that life has meaning. And
Mm.
then the continuation of humanity is like a subdivision off, like, well, if life has meaning, then it's important for humanity to continue. But if life does not have meaning, why would it be important for humanity to
I
continue?
think you touch on something really important because you said earlier on that some people might adopt Judaic principles even if they don't necessarily, I think, believe in God or whatever, or believe in the totality of Judaism. And I think actually in practice, like I've got a Jewish friend who
Well,
basically believes in God but doesn't believe in Judaism. Another Jewish friend,
for marriage,
and
the majority of Jews do it for marriage, at least for a period of
but
time. And
he's not married, and I think and his friends don't seem to be getting married either, who are Jews, right? And I think that's a kind of direction which a lot of Jews are going, the left-leaning Jews, right? Because they kind of don't really believe in Judaism, but they're just Jewish by race, right? And so my point is that if you don't really understand your meaning and your purpose in life, or have meaning in your life, then you cannot do the difficult task of being married. It's really difficult. And in Islam, we are told that marriage is half a faith, because marriage grows you. You have to be kind. You have to take care of people. These are spiritual qualities that are really difficult. And if you don't believe that there's a higher purpose to marriage, it's really hard to be married. I think that's why in secular society, marriage is breaking down because it's really difficult. But you see the opposite in religious societies where it's still working, it's still happening. So I suppose, I mean, yeah, my key point there is meaning is really important. Okay, and meaning. Okay, what is the meaning of life? Let's quickly answer that question because that links to how you can stay married. If I think, yeah, the meaning of life, according to Islam, in more colloquial, simple terms, is oneness with God. Like you're trying to lose your selfish desires towards higher goals, which essentially connect you with God, because you can only really understand God or be one with God if you're a bit more like God. Like God gives you rain and air and whatever, even if you don't listen to Him, right? And then He rewards you if you use your brain and are in line with His teachings for your own benefit. So oneness with God. What is the meaning of life? Actually, I'm going to ask you, forget Judaism for a second. What is the meaning of life according to your understanding of Hinduism?
It's probably dharma and obligation, although obviously there's other aspects to that. But I mean, the first fold is you're a creation that has an obligation to your creator, and there's a prescription for how to regulate your life in order to meet those obligations to your creator. And I think you could interpret Judaism uh, the same manner.
Why does God need you to be? Why would you be obliged to God? Like, why would that? I would say that would put a lot of people off Hinduism, or even the way you explain Judaism. It's just a bunch of obligations. Like, why? What does God need from you? My Islamic perspective is very different. God needs nothing from you, but you benefit as a human being, whether you're a man or a woman, by doing the things that by following not just obligations, I think responsibilities towards humanity. You become a better person. You become a more spiritual, beautiful person rather than a selfish person who's just self-involved. Responsibility is other involved. Makes you a beautiful person.
Yeah, well, the first one I think is a philosophical question that doesn't necessarily matter, and it's saying that God presumably doesn't need anything from us, but that doesn't negate our obligation. And it's that, like if you the father example, or who has everything, but it doesn't, just because God is all powerful and has everything, and I could offer, doesn't has nothing to do with my obligation. And so the primal directive of recognizing that there's a God, and then recognizing that this great power that my very being necessitates, deserves praise, thanks, worship, and then further level that there's a prescribed method for this life that we've been given, that we have an obligation, whether through the prophets or through some form of a revelation, that there's an obligation to follow it to the best of our ability. So obviously that goes completely contrary to secular, and the most important benefit of modern secularism is probably best practices, like related to like medicine, science, or even lifestyles, where you could see what various people are doing and adopt kind of a pick and choose. And most secular people, like, okay, if you're a Jew, there's a lot of infrastructure if you accept the orthodoxy for family and tradition, but basically you have to give your children over to the structured system that you're going to, if you're a man, you're going to do the obligated prayers, coming to synagogue 3 times a day. Your children are going to follow the holidays. You're going to send your children to a special school. And then the community, like your membership in the community, is somewhat based upon your children following these practices. And if your children don't follow these
If you
practices,
summarize what you're saying, because I've got a little bit lost, and I purposely put this comment by Claire, who can be difficult, but is useful, right? She's saying, "What a load of waffle." It could be me or you. I'm not sure who it was she's referring to, right?
because I'm trying to respond to like questions that you asked maybe like 20 minutes ago that I didn't even have time to address. So I was trying to thread everything together.
Yes.
With the weave as Trump and Joe Rogan, but or just throwing out thoughts on things that you had said that didn't necessarily have direct continuity with the other things.
Sure, I appreciate.
Yeah,
I appreciate that it's difficult to explain complicated ideas really quickly, but I try to bear in mind that the modern viewer kind of wants sound bites. That sounds terrible, but like the short version, because they can't concentrate for more than a minute, right? And that's kind of insulting, but I kind of like, I'm trying to help people.
Yeah, I mean, you think
and
King
that maybe
Solomon,
just be the reality.
well, I mean, you might be self-contradicting your way that you can't. I mean, like King Solomon, Proverbs 115, my son, don't go in the ways of your time. And you're just saying like, okay, there's God's law. These things are um, outside of the boundaries of times that fads, historical trends come and go, but God's law will remain the same.
Sure,
Yet,
but in Islam, we do have a tradition of keeping it short and simple. So if you talk about the Talmud, which are not the Bible, but commentary on the Bible, right? Is that roughly right?
Yeah, I'm saying it wasn't made.
We've
for
got similar things.
It's supposed to somewhat even. I mean, now there's a modern push; it's for everybody. But historically, or even today, you say like relatively, no, it's only for a certain class of men and scholars that are capable of handling all of their responsibilities and dedicating themselves to scholarship. And that's why the essential role of men, that there needs to be sages of the generation, and the sages of the generation need to make authoritative rulings on what are the obligations for men to deal with the most common problems confronting them.
That's really interesting.
And that's almost exclusively a male thing, like the training grounds, the criteria for like the sages of the generation, and just saying, look, most men aren't going to be even in the training centers for the sages of the generation. That's a special obligation, like upon men, that you're saying someone has to know and understand all this stuff. And if it's not you, you should at least respect the people doing that.
So I'm going to go into that because that's really interesting role for men. Like it's good to have roles for men, clear roles, and like things to aim for. As human beings, we love to aim for things, right? But very quickly, I was going to say that you could say in some ways we could say the how do you say, anyway, in short, instead of the Talmud, we in Islam, we have the Hadith, the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, and they could have a sentence long thing, right? Nice and short. So it's not against the teaching of Islam to be simple, short, and precise. So that's that, I guess. For example, Prophet Muhammad said, everybody's a shepherd. Would you agree with that? Everybody has a role to play in leading people in their different way. Even women, their role is to take care of the families. They're shepherds within their families, for their children.
Maybe it's more Ahmadiyya that is, you're more liberal in the sense where, okay, obviously you have the scripture and you have different statements that could be understood metaphorically and have meaning. But the law is derived from modern authoritative texts, like in terms like Jews, like you're not supposed to look to the Torah or even the Talmud or even the scholarship from hundreds of years ago for the law. You're supposed to follow the leaders of your generation, and every few generations there's an authoritative text that comes out and is saying, when you're looking for what to do, you should be inspired by the Talmud, have that as by the Quran for you, but there's authoritative texts that come out every few generations that really, that's what people are looking to when it comes up, like, well, what should you do you should do what's in the authoritative law code. And
Okay,
like,
let me support what you're saying, because I think you're laying down the law, as it were, but you're not explaining why men should do it logically or based on psychology or biology. So, as I said earlier on, just to support what you're saying, and I think it's
throw in
really
one last thing because like it's directly related to the topic at hand.
yes.
Generally, they say the scripture is for women and children. I mean, obviously, we all follow the scripture, and that's the prophet. But the scripture is the venue for women and children. Like the Talmud and the law, that's the venue for men, and that's like for women and children. It always has to have some lesson, some purpose, some
Oh,
things that's holding together. As we're the more abstract level of just figuring out and deciphering and ruling according to the law code, that's the purview of men. And in fact, in the house of men, where scholars sit, it's maybe even less likely that the scripture would be brought up in that manner, which it would be more common when women and children are present.
okay. Cool. I think it's because we've only got 2 minutes left. I think it's great that men have a role that actually fits in with biology, which is that in terms of guidance, we are good at making tough decisions, the just rules. We're not swayed by, oh, that might upset somebody, which is the agreeableness which is built into women, but it's really useful when you can't, argue against a newborn baby. That's why they're so agreeable. They just serve in that beautiful way. But also, if you look at most geniuses, they're men, right? And people might think in Islam, why are all the prophets men? Why are the imams men? It doesn't make them more special. It just gives them a different role. Being an imam, a leader, is not just about intellectual capacity, but physical capacity to always be of service to humanity outside the world and take on abusive people as well, people who don't understand, and women are more sensitive to that. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why men should have that role, and I agree with Judaism in that sense as well. I'm going to ask you another small question that we haven't touched on. Is kind of some of the details. Me and you both have beards. And for me as a Muslim, that's not by accident. To be a man and also to be a woman is really difficult. So to be a man is really difficult, to be tough, whatever. And how you dress, how you look, how you behave in many different ways. Even our Islamic prayer, we have to put our heads on the ground because we know the body affects the soul, and it's all about the soul at the end of the day, right? So would you say me looking more manly enables you in some such a way, and more maybe not such a way, to be manly and therefore do as you say, fulfill your obligations? I would say it does.
Yeah, I mean the beard's an important aspect because according to strict Jewish Islamic law, you have to have a beard, and part of it is the um, gender identification. And there's you're not it's forbidden for a man to wear woman's clothing or vice versa, according to traditional law. And saying like men are not supposed to be pretty, and like shaving or things that you're saying like a man shouldn't be pretty like a woman, and having the beard, uh, and then you could also saying that there's a whole aspect of obligations, roles for men, most notably as father, provider, protector. Uh, but then I think there's the higher we were talking about, men as leaders of society, most notably as the scholars, law deciders, sages of the generation. And the beard is almost always the like you can't be a sage without a beard. In like in modern Judaism, um, really none of the clean shaven scholars or leaders are looked at with that sage type quality. And so there is some sort of aspect to the beard and manliness, and especially for the older man that's not necessarily like the white beard, not the person like, oh, he has a beard and I should be scared of violence or the battlefield, but the special type of manly sage that to head the patriarch. Okay, like I'm
Mm.
getting older, and I'm not going to be on the battlefront, or I'm not looking.
So
You
you in Judaism is huge, and you can see that from the Orthodox Jews. They all have huge beards. So, and you've got one, I've got one, and I do think like if you're a man, like you're saying, like it's the same in Islam. You can't wear silk, for example. You can't wear women's clothing. If you're a man wearing red nail polish, it does affect how you behave. And there's also sort of what they call psychological tests that kind of show that kind of thing, right? I've seen a whole documentary about if you simply wear different clothes, it affects how you behave, right? I'm going to kind of summarize my thoughts. There's a whole bunch of stuff in this document. Do check the description about what the Islamic perspective is, and then you can summarize your thought, and then we'll end it there. So men and women have distinct but equally important roles in families and societies, rooted in biological differences and perfected by Islamic teachers that emphasize specialization and natural inclinations, ultimately serving a shared spiritual goal. So men and women are considered jawaz, which means one of the opposite pair, like shoes as well. So we're working together towards a beautiful higher goal of becoming more spiritual, and being men and women simply means playing your part. What would be your ending summary of what is the role of men in society today?
Yeah, this is very good. Appreciate you inviting me on. An important topic always to think about, and it's too big for me to like put like a definitive point. I think you discussed a lot of it. And it's like men have obligations across the board at the most basic primal level to be a husband, a father, a protector, a provider. But I think the stronger obligations of a man refer to leadership in society, and somewhat the nature of logic, argumentation, taking counsel, recognizing precedents, religion, how to formulate decisions, and then um, consensus of not like democracy, at least somewhat among the sages, where you're going for the sake of your community, have the best minds come together and try to form some sort of consensus and move forward in a way that and so I think the higher aspect of a man is, and I wouldn't exclude women, is to accept that calling, and from the basics of providing for your family to taking a important role in the larger community. Although I would say utilitarian, like secularism, is logical, and probably the people are acting in their best interest according to how they understand it. And you could see the trade-off of why a lot of the top minds, higher IQ correlates with secularism, probably because of the limitations. And you say, okay, the traditional society definitely provides a better structure for having a large family, having a
Hmm.
community help raise the family, life cycle events, common beliefs. However, more intelligent, traveled, worldly people might want to experiment with other things that are forbidden, or pick and choose, or see that there's this other science or thing that
Being
contradicts.
more intelligent doesn't necessarily make you better at life. So, for example, you got Elon Musk, who supposedly is really intelligent rocket scientist, but failed in many of his marriages, and has a lot of personal problems, and he can't even find happiness, even according to himself. So that's an interesting point to make. So, but anyway, thank you very much, David. It's been a long time. Great talking to you again. I actually agree with so many of the things you said. I just think that I like to provide the reasons from a secular secular viewpoint, why it is that you're right and religion is right. So thank you very much. Shalom, and whatever else you do.
Namaste, Hare Krishna, Shalom, Happy Passover. I look forward to the next time. Reach out anytime.
Thank you. Shalom. Bye. Salam.